Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another live hangout here at Voice Essentials. It is good to be spending the next 50 minutes or so with you. I hope you've had a great weekend wherever you are. Linda has reliably informed me that today, and this is kind of, appropriate to what we're doing today, today is International Podcast Day. There you go. So if you are listening to us as a podcast, if you are listening to us as a replay, you are welcome, and we're so glad to have you chime in. Anywhere between 300 to 500 people listen to these shows over a week. The numbers slowly but surely grow after that, but within a week, about 300 to 500 people. And so it's always good to have you, listen, because the majority of you do listen to this show as a replay. But it is good to see all of the usuals in the live chat currently. We've got, of course, we've got Linda, we've got Rebecca in Texas, we've got Dean in, is it Hawaii, Dean? Honolulu, did I see? We've got Karen from Singwise is there. Mr. Fomiati is there. Kelly from Canada. We are a truly international community, and it's good to be hanging out with you. And our special guest today comes to us from the west coast of the US, if I'm not mistaken. She can correct me if I'm wrong in a moment. We were talking about, she's been all over the place recently. She might tell us a bit about that. So Cate Frazier-Neely. Kate's been on the show before, but it's been a little while. In fact, I'm starting to wonder whether it was pre-COVID. And Cate, of course, is a part of the trio that wrote the seminal book called Singing Through Change, and that's about menopause and the challenges that women who are going through menopausal and into postmenopausal life can experience with their voice. But that's not why she's here today. We are going to be having Cate talk with us through the lens of an osteopath. And I'm going to, once I introduce Cate, which I'm about to do any second, we're going to just clarify that, because Cate is not an osteopath. And I think I said last week that she was, and that was my mistake, not Kate's. And so I don't want us to be misunderstanding the approach. We'll clarify that in a moment. One more thing that I need you all to know and to remind you of, because I've been telling you this the last couple of weeks, there is no show next week. Next week is a public holiday here in Queensland, Australia. And so I will be, actually, I've already scheduled to be cutting my hedge. Spare me a thought next week, because it is my least favorite job in the lawn because it's so hard. It's a big hedge. So anyway, no show next week, and we'll come back the week after that. So we'll see each other again in 2 weeks. Of course, subscribe, hit the white bell icon, and you'll always get the reminders, or set your own alarm like Rebecca did today. I saw in the chat just a moment ago, so that you don't miss a show. Enough of that. Let's bring Cate on.
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
Hello, Cate. Welcome back.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me on again. It has been a hot minute.
It's been a hot minute. What, am I right in thinking that it was pre-COVID?
I think it might have been.
It might have been. Yeah.
Yes.
A little
That's
while.
Crazy.
A little while, and I might get you to just because it's been so long since we had you on. I might get you to just tell us a little bit about yourself in a moment, but I'll just so people might be thinking to them, hey, I follow a guy on YouTube called Adam Frazier-Neely. Is he related somehow? And here's the big
Yes,
reveal. Yeah,
Adam Neely
yes, he
is
is.
our son.
He
Yes,
is. Yeah, we were talking
this is
about
our son.
him prior to the show. He is one crazy, talented, skilled dude, man. But we're not here to talk Adam today. We're here to talk Cate. And you share a bit about what you've been doing since we last saw you, and maybe build a bit of a profile for us for those who may have not met you before.
Well, actually, I've been off of social media for about 2 years now, and the reason is it was kind of time to change my life up a bunch, and we had been living in the Washington, D.C. area for about 45 years, and we sold our house and moved to southern Spain for 3 months, and then came back to Maryland and moved ourselves and my partially disabled mother, who we had been caring for, out to the West Coast. So we're about an hour south of Seattle now. And it's taken a year to settle. I had an accident and got a concussion, and there were some other things that happened. Um, but by way of introduction, just that I've been teaching for almost 48 years. And golly, I remember when people would say that and I was younger, I was like, God, you're so old. When are you going to stop? And this past couple of years, as I've been off of social media, I did take a small teaching sabbatical, my first one, and slowed down. I've slowed down quite a bit. But I grew up in a family of professional musicians, and by the time I went to college, and I didn't have a voice lesson until I went to college, um, I was had a lot of experience both singing and playing instruments. And when I was in undergrad, I started dating this guy who asked me what my major was, and I said, "Well, I'm going to major in singing." And he said, "Well, how do you major in singing?" And it was a sincere question, and he's got a good point. And I said, "I'm learning the proper way to sing." And this young man, who 50 something years later I'm still married to, he had been born and grew up in Africa, and he said to me, "Do you mean to tell me that the entire continent of Africa is not singing properly?"
What a great
And
question.
this bell went off, and I
Yeah.
was like, ding, 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 he's right. So back in the 80s, I started trying to work with popular singers, and I've worked with popular and classical singers and all these various permeations of whatever that means for a very long time. Um, Sort of as a prelude to what we're going to be talking about today, I've also had a really strange health history, and standard vocal pedagogy could not help me. And I was just telling Dan before we got on, all I wanted to do was sing freely and sing my stuff. I did have a very good performing career. By good, I mean successful in the way I define success. For about 25 years, I did a lot of contemporary chamber music. I did some chamber opera, did oratorio, did some musical theater. But growing up, I'd always sung folk music. I loved bluegrass um, and jazz because my grandfather was a jazz drummer. Um, so uh, that's kind of the background. I'm a published composer. I was on the forefront of popular music pedagogy and somatic education and collegial teaching and women's health and singing. And, you just have to follow what you're interested in. And if the status quo, I mean, I don't want to make it seem like standard vocal pedagogy isn't important. That's ridiculous. Of course it is. Um, and you can't branch off from something that you know nothing about.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's not either or, it's and.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's and. And yes, there are things that are different, but the basic overarching premises are important and they still stand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, does that
I
give
think
a bit of
I think that's
background?
great, and I think it is important that we understand that, and this may be a necessary thing to understand as we approach today's conversation, is that if in looking to celebrate the branch, you take an axe to the trunk of the tree, the whole thing comes falling down, right?
It
So
really does. And I will just say, I think a lot of our colleagues do that. They try to take branch to the, a branch to the axe, an axe
axe
to
to
the
the branch
trunk.
to the trunk. Yes, they do.
I don't ask me to speak in metaphors right now. Um,
That's okay. I'll take
but,
care of the metaphors.
but I do think that there's ineffective teaching and effective teaching.
Yeah.
So if someone has had an ineffective classical teacher, that is going to color their view of standard pedagogy,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And we had Joanne, who you are very good friends and close colleague
Yes.
with, having co-authored, tri-authored the wonderful
Yeah.
book we mentioned earlier. And a few weeks back, and we were talking about POTS and hypermobility and the necessary approach adjustments that need to be made when working with that. And I think we can very much approach today's conversation with that same sense of free access, which will be a good thing.
Yes.
Let's focus our conversation in, and again, and this is where I get to take very much the responsibility of my misinterpretation of when I reached out to you and said, Kate, come back onto the show, let's have a conversation. And then you said yes, and I said, great, what are we going to talk about? And you said, let's talk about this. And I misinterpreted, and I didn't realize that you're not an osteopath,
No.
but we are very much going to be looking at our thing today through the view of an osteopath, yeah? Through the lens, if you will. And if we in one sense we could pull out sort of from that focus to think about it as this whole body approach to singing. Firstly, I wonder if you might outline, I keep using this term, the lens of the osteopath. Maybe if you could outline, again, recognizing you are not an osteopath, I'm not an osteopath, and we're not going to try and swim outside our lane.
No.
But what would that lens show us when we're approaching Learn to Sing?
Well, and there are other disciplines that also take this view that our bodies are this amazing, glorious network of connections and functional continuum. And voice science and Western medicine look at the parts without this understanding of the connections. That old song, the shin bone's connected to the knee bone. And so my understanding of this osteopath lens, and there are other kinds of body workers that also use this lens, such as cranial sacral therapists. There are yoga teachers and Pilates teachers and those kinds of body workers who are also singers that also look at it through this more holistic lens.
Would we also include ones like Feldenkrais and Alexander?
I think so, because like, and Rolfing, and even Alexander technique, they just have a more complete view of the human body,
Mm.
then and vocal pedagogy until recently has been largely from Western
Yes.
civilization
Yes.
sources, right? And certainly Western medicine has been that way. And the idea is that um, the body is made up of more than one diaphragm. It's made up of a cranial sacral diaphragm that sits in the dome of the head, and that includes that can include the eyes, the xiphoid process, which is the bone that the eyes sit in, and the occipital whippital joint. That's what I call it because I can never remember the name of it. Um, and that the tongue and the tongue and the soft palate are considered a diaphragm. That the thoracic diaphragm also has an upper diaphragm that is made of, I've forgotten all of the things, but it's the sternum, the clavicle, and some of the upper ribs, and that's considered part of the thoracic diaphragm. Although it's called it's either higher thoracic or there's another name that I've forgotten. And then there's the pelvic diaphragm. And some osteopaths and many body workers consider the domes of the feet diaphragms 6 and 7. So these things tend to sit in dome shapes um, horizontally.
Yeah.
But that's just sort of an easy way to look at it.
What
And
what was it that led you down the path of looking into
yes,
voice through this
and why
lens?
is it important? Well, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, you can be a fantastic singer and a fantastic teacher and not know any of this stuff. Absolutely. The reason I was led down this was because um, I was one of those women who really got screwed by the way women's health and birth and birthing has been handled by Western medicine. And I think over a 20-year period, I had 8 or 9 abdominal surgeries where this was like in the middle of when my career was going very well, and it happened around the time our son was born, and then I had his sister 4 years later. I was really mistreated. I had a lot of medical trauma. Thank goodness both children were okay, but I wasn't. And then further on down the line, each time I had one, and I was having a surgery at the rate of every 2 years, I had to relearn how to sing. And then I went through an early menopause, and then I was diagnosed, which is its own thing, but I also was diagnosed with bilateral vocal fold paresis, both vocal cords partially paralyzed.
Mm.
And I just absolutely refused to give up. And I think that I have a questing spirit and I'm curious, but I just wanted to sing again, you know? And so when I started looking outside of Western medicine, that led me to looking outside of Western vocal pedagogy.
Uh-huh.
And I think lots of times when you have a singer or a teacher who has been led to these things, it's because of the same reasons why we have Alexander technique. Alexander developed it because he lost his voice as an actor. Ida Rolf developed Rolfing because I believe her children were having some severe myofascial and bone issues. And she started treating people and developing this. I think the Feldenkrais, his first name starts with an M. He also developed it because of what was happening in his own body and what he saw in other people. So that is why I came to learning, being led down how these diaphragms work together. And somehow in vocal pedagogy, all we ever hear about is the lower thoracic diaphragm. And everybody will write, it is a large dome-shaped muscle, blah, 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 blah. Yes, it's very important. But here's the kicker. Where one diaphragm is compromised in its movement, and these diaphragms move in tandem to move fluids around the body, among other things. Where one is stuck, they all get stuck.
Interesting.
And that was, I was having all this problem in my throat, and I was seeing people who were helping me, but not completely. And then when I started really understanding what else was blocked, I had to go outside of Western medicine in order to get the help I needed. The latest, I've been using cranial sacrotherapy to help with my concussion, but I've been using that since the late 1980s. And the latest round of therapeutic therapy that I've had has been what's called pelvic floor therapy, which is very common in Europe, but not so common here in the United States. And so you can be a woman of my age and still benefit from those kinds of therapies, because what they do is they help get the movement unstuck. In singing, we talk about, we want dynamic movement, right? We want dynamic movement. We want posture to be dynamic and sort of ever flowing. It's not just this. As a matter of fact, I think, Dan, you said in one of your latest videos, you don't even tend to think of posture. You tend to think of alignment or something.
Yeah. Yes. That very much sounds like what I would have said.
Yes, and you're right. But if we have this sort of epidemic of women in Western culture whose pelvic floor diaphragm is all messed up. It cannot move like it needs to. As a matter of fact, when you first start feeling it move, and there's this rocking motion with every inhale and exhale, you are just sort of in a state of wonder, because maybe you haven't felt that for a long time, or you never did feel it. And also, Western pedagogy was focused on young men's bodies, and you have a lot less room in there. We've got this thing called the womb. And even if you don't have the womb anymore, you've had a hysterectomy, energetically, it's still there. And the space is still there. And the ligaments are, they're all hanging off of something else now. But that is through the lens of the osteopath and some of these other workers. So, for example, if someone comes to, I will give an example. A woman who is a tenured professor at a music school, and she was in her mid-40s. She came because she was having no joy in her singing. And among other things, her young husband had died, and she had never really gotten over it. Also, she was singing her classical music in a very weird sort of manufactured way, although her popular music was better. And so we had to work this upper part of the diaphragmatic system because of her grieving. This was all tight and not moving, because that was not moving. This wasn't moving. Because this wasn't moving, the thoracic diaphragm and the pelvic diaphragm were not moving. So I'm not able to do the kinds of therapies, but I can either refer people to, or I have things that I do that get it embodied in a way that uses the whole body.
So because
And
that was going to be my next question. What are the key principles around this approach?
well, if we're talking about functional work, we're talking about therapeutic work pacing. So if you take a very simple exercise like short raspberries and you go, what you want to do in this slow process is you want to get so that, and this is not how you sing, but we're trying to get things to move, right?
Yeah.
You want to get the abdomen, meaning about the area, depending on where your belly button is. You want to get, you actually want to move it in and have it push the chest up. And for women, you want them, and men, you want them to be able to feel the bottom of the chair more with each. It's like it's pushing down against the chair. Once again, this isn't how you sing, but we're trying to get things activated, which eventually rolls over into a sustained sound that is embodying all those places that haven't been moving and that have been stuck.
I'm picking up here that a big part of this is going to be having a really clear, what's the right word? A really clear mind map of where everything is.
So it's interesting you should say that, because when I first got into this, it wasn't through this particular lens. It was through Andover education and body mapping.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. And, the books that we all had back then about, from Barbara Conable and the mechanics of breathing and everything, were pretty limited. I mean, they did, they would show the diaphragm from the front, but they wouldn't show it from the back or where its insertions were in the lumbar spine.
Yeah.
And they couldn't show you the inner structure of the pelvic bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at like Grey's Anatomy and you look at like coloring books and stuff, and it's just absolutely unidentifiable. They will show a couple of holes in there, but they don't show anything else. You can't see the crisscross of muscles.
Yeah.
It's a complex series of muscles that engage. As a matter of fact, I had a teacher once who said that if you want to know what support is in singing, what you want to do is you want to take your shirt and wind it up like this so that it comes sticking out like that. And that what this does is it's the sticking out of the fabric because of the drawing in of the muscles.
Interesting.
Now, when she first did that, I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But now I understand much better that it's a complex muscle move, that the end result, the sticking out, the end result that we want is because of this complex interplay of muscles that have to move.
Yeah.
That's what she meant by that.
I find that one of the more challenging things for students to often navigate is their own established sense of normal. And what I mean by that is, I might have a student come in and we're talking alignment. This might be, in fact, I work on alignment in the very first lesson, a very dynamic, buoyant alignment. And often a student will go, but I'm well, not often, but you will get the cases where a student will say, but I am aligned, and it's very apparent to me that they're not. And so working through that moving from that established sense of normal into these new awarenesses of one's own body, what have you noticed that requires for a developing singer? Because there's a great sense of kinesthetic awareness that is required here
Yes.
too.
There's a cognitive kinesthetic awareness that has to take place. And it's also somatic perception on my part. In other words, and I think this is what you're talking about for you too, you perceive that things could be more efficient.
Yeah.
But there are dozens of little steps between what you perceive and what the singer is aware of.
Yes.
Right? And I also think that certain singers have what I call singing sense. They're better at this than others. And honestly, people don't end up working with me unless they want to work this way. But what is so beautiful is to watch them come into a flowering where they start to feel their own bodies at work in such a visceral way.
Yeah.
You know, it's very, very exciting. And I think that's why a lot of us teach, is you are guiding someone. So when I said therapeutic pacing, there are these small steps, and there's always, like, in the first 3 or 4 lessons, there's always this, really, you just want me to do this like for 3 or 4 minutes 4 or 5 times a day, you know? And the ones that are able to do that, it usually takes about 3 weeks to get into a habit like that. They're the ones that start to build and start to be able to say, oh my gosh. So when I go to sing, I know where to put my awareness. And I had a teacher once who said, you don't have to listen. Don't listen when you sing, you have to feel. And I thought, oh my God, if I feel anymore, I'll blow up. You know, that's not what he meant. He meant this kinesthetic sense that we all need. And who was the opera singer? Was it Dolores Ziegler? I was listening to an interview with her, and the young interviewer was asking her, well, where's your mind? Where's your mind when you're singing? And she kept saying, where's my pathway of air? Where's my pathway of air? And I thought, no one except a fine singer is really going to understand that.
Yeah.
But that meant something to her. And then the other thing I want along the same lines is, I was watching a special many years ago with Wynton Marsalis and Kathleen Battle, and they were doing some Handel works for soprano and trumpet. And they showed Wynton Marsalis working with his teacher. And then when they went into the recording studio, the teacher was behind a window. And all you saw the teacher do was do this. That meant something. That was all those months and months of work. That meant something to Marsalis. And so sometimes when you go to describe the minutia of the work that has to happen, and the slowness of it, and the variety of it, and the pacing of it, it sounds tedious. But if you're focused on the process of what you're uncovering, it goes by very fast.
We've spent so far, we've been very much focused on in one sense, the physicality of and the anatomical structure and the kinesthesia. What have you noted in how this plays out in a person's sense of connectivity to emotion and the ability to therefore Have you noticed that this provides a release for the singer emotionally?
Yes, well, it takes all the pressure off the throat. You feel the throat working, but that's a really good question. Their ability to connect with what they want to say and do is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. And in many cases, they've not been able to. Okay, I'll give you an example of another person who's Gabriel Rios, who is a Cuban pop singer. He's very well known in Central and South America, but he got tapped to do a musical theater role, and he had never sung musical theater or sung in the range that this required. Brilliant musician, never had a voice lesson in his life, terribly worried about this. But what this process did for him was that it enabled him to do a completely foreign, what's the word I want, foreign type of music and connect with it. And unfortunately, this was a new Broadway musical by Punch Brothers. Who's the guy who's the head of the Punch Brothers? Anyway, it got derailed by the pandemic. I still have the recordings, which I'm not allowed to release. Boo-hoo. But it's stunning what he was able to do.
Wow.
And before it was just this, how am I going to get this note? But because it's whole body, you are hitting all these emotional centers, or you're hitting all your chakras.
Yeah.
Right? Hitting all the chakras all the way down, and that grounds you. And this sounds so fruity, I can't believe I'm saying it, but it brings the energy up from the earth, and it brings the energy down from the ether, and they meet in this area behind your heart, and it's heartfelt.
I can't. You said I can't believe I'm saying this because it sounded fruity, but I want to take you to something that you and I were talking about prior to hitting the broadcast button for today's discussion, and I was referencing a book by Kristen Linklater called "Freeing the Natural Voice." For those of you who are unfamiliar with the text, a very big text in the acting world. Well, way back in the 80s, really, 80s and 90s. And we're talking about the challenge of using that, freeing the natural voice. And yet that is what we're talking about here, isn't it? We are talking about the release of the true essence of the voice. What do you think? Because I'm conscious of time, and we do need to bring this to a happy close. What do you think, as people are sitting here and listening to our conversation and the stuff that you are so generously giving us? What do you think are the challenges, the main challenges that people will confront in seeking to apply some of these concepts to their singing?
It's my opinion that this kind of work can't take place just in the voice lesson.
Yeah.
It has to take place in the Rolfer's office or the cranial sacral office. It has to take place in how you feed your body and what you feed your mind, what you feed your heart, what you listen to. And don't try to like, and now I'm going to use my diaphragm this way, and now I'm going to use my pelvic floor this way. I think that experimenting with various sounds is very useful, but this is a process, and even things like self-talk, even things like not getting embroiled in political discussions, watching where your head is, watching where identifying when you are anxious, which I will say, since I hit my head, I was telling Dan, since I hit my head and got the concussion, I have been struggling with my management of ADHD with something called comorbid anxiety, which sounds terrible, but it's terrible anxiety that comes with ADHD sometimes. And you can't sing when you're anxious. So perhaps you have to go to behavioral therapy, learn how to manage your emotions. All these things are to bring you into a place. Your body wants so much to be well and free and happy, but it becomes a whole way of life as well as you can do with your present situation. And remember that no system got well in an environment that made it ill to begin with. And that includes relationships. You know, that includes the toxins in our foods. It includes so many things. And you just say, okay, I'm committed to this, and you just keep meeting it the best you can. I'm certainly not a saint. I will have a couple of days where all I want to do is eat chocolate and watch Netflix. You know?
That sounds like a good couple of days.
Oh my God, yes. But then you kind of have to get on.
You do. Yeah.
And be aware that as you get older, these things change. You might have to. I went to a rolfer for 5 years, and that stopped working. So I had to go to something else. I had to give up a lot in order to have the money to do these things. And not everybody will be able to do it, but you can still follow a healthy mindset and a healthy heart set.
I love where you've directed us there, because I think it's so important that we recognize that and this is for those of us who are watching the show, no one individual can give you everything you need. That person, and there are those out there that will suggest that they can, but actually your journey is going to almost certainly have multiple singing teachers, but also alongside that learning to sing experience are going to be other professionals, and I've got videos that talk about Alexander Feldenkrais, body mapping, and all of these other practitioners that can really assist. I regularly send students to, physiotherapists that specialize in neck, jaw, these sorts of alignment, behavioral adjustments that are required. And it's really important that we don't, that we allow our journey to encompass those other individuals, that we don't get stuck in a singular sort of one person, one stop shop. Because those people, they actually don't exist. There's too much to know in all of these areas, aren't there, for one person to have gathered all that information?
Well, and we're also in the midst of a paradigm shift right now between biomechanical and biosyntegrity, which I don't know enough about, but I'm starting to learn more about, which plays with this idea. The biosyntegrity goes quite well with the idea of that we're a great cranial sacral web. Everything's connected, and that we have, the body wants to right itself, but the body is also dependent on what your beliefs are, and it's okay to re-examine your beliefs. That's another whole topic, but I do think that in the book that Nancy and Joanne and I wrote, we talked about this a lot, but we decided not to put it in the book. We had to kind of distill everything down to the simplest thing we could.
We need to bring today's discussion to a close, and I've got other questions that we could have gone on with, but I do We've got Wildflower has just asked a question. I think we'll use this to bring us to an end, just to be able to answer a question. Wildflower's asked a question. I wonder if some foot rocking would help us feel any changes in our air support and voice. I wish I was more clear on how to affect other diaphragms.
That's a really good question. And I would say yes. Get one of those little spiky balls and put them under your feet.
Mm-hmm.
Do footwork of yoga. And actually, Dan, do you know Sarah Whitten?
Why does that name?
I don't know. She's gotten to be pretty well known now. She is a body worker, yoga, Pilates, but she's just absolutely brilliant. And she does a lot of exercises. Well, for example, you might try singing a phrase without doing the foot walking. Mm-hmm. And the reason I brought Sarah up is this is what she has people do, and I've worked with her before. So sing a phrase or two without the foot walking, then work on your feet for about 10 minutes. And you can look up acupuncture points, you can look up the little spiky balls that you roll on, you can massage, whatever, and then go back and sing again. What do you notice?
It's fascinating, isn't it?
And work with the area that you have access to.
Yeah.
For example, you can look up online. There are diaphragm self-massages. If your diaphragm is riding too high because of tension or anxiety, you can get it to release a little bit. And then when you do and you go to breathe, and I'm not one of those people that believe there's a one right way to breathe, but breathe. I just get too excited anyway. But I do think there has to be freedom in what you do, and see what happens to your intake and your outgo just from that.
There's so many things that we're going to continue, I think, discovering about the human body and how the interconnectivity of it all, and its influence on the voice. And thank you for coming on today and talking with us. And in one sense, opening. My takeaway from our conversation today is once again, open your mind, to what is possible. The fact that we come as a singing teacher, and you were sharing how long you've been teaching. I'm coming towards the end of my 29th year of teaching. It's very easy to become set in your ways, isn't it? Like, it's just because we just go through the motions. This works, I know it works, and it's just, our conversation today has just been a really great reminder that, wow, there's just so much new knowledge that is much often hearkening back to old knowledge, and
don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Absolutely. And I'm not in the habit of doing so, but I think it's lovely to be reminded that so many of these other ideas, these concepts, so beautifully complement the baby in the bathwater.
Well, yes. I mean, for example, when I got all this sort of working, I thought, oh, so this is what they mean, ride on the breath. When I was performing in my 20s and 30s before Adam Neely was born, I rode on that breath without thinking much about it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you did too. And then, then stuff started happening. I think that's not uncommon for many people of all genders, because the body, as we evolve and get older, the body stops being toned the way it was. You have to up your game.
Yeah.
You have to find something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mix it up. Thank you, Cate, for coming on to today's show.
Thank you for having me for this topic. I hope that I was able to be clear.
Well, it was clear to me, and I'm almost certain that it was clear to everyone else that was watching, because you did converse with us in such an accessible way, and I've really appreciated
Good.
you having you on the show again.
Thank you. I loved it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to your listeners.
I know that they will be saying thank you. In fact, I can see them saying thank you and hitting the love button on the chat. Thanks everyone for tuning in again. The human body is just fascinating. I'm continually amazed at when I work with students, just how differently each body responds to different activities and the different way we experience things. And once again, just listening to Cate's discussion, I think we're reminded of those very facts. Hit the thumbs up button if you've enjoyed today's conversation, which I know you have, and that'll be appreciated. Again, reminder: no show next week, so just make sure you you can jump onto the channel and watch one of the 1,000 other videos that are there if you like. But we will be back in person live in 2 weeks, and I think I've got scheduled a mini topic. And now that I say that, I'm pretty sure that's true, but I can't remember what the mini topic is going to be. So it's going to be a surprise to all of us. But we'll be sure to do that when we see each other again in 2 weeks. I hope you have a good 2 weeks. Stay healthy, happy, and safe. I'll see you again soon. I'm Dr. Dan. Sing well.